the November 1st meeting of the Pinellas County Charter Review Commission to order. My name is Brian Ongst. I'm the chair. I was appointed by Commissioner Latvala. We'll start with the roll call to my right.
Dr. Lindsay Grove, Vice Chair, and I'm an at-large citizen appointee.
Senator Nick DeSegli.
Mark Strickland, appointed by Commissioner Law.
Rob Posovic, Commissioner Eggers appointee.
Ashley Overend, appointed by Commissioner Brian Scott.
Todd Jennings, at-large citizen appointee.
Ricky Butler, Commissioner Peters appointee.
Terry Lipsy Scott, Commissioner Flowers appointee.
Tom Steck, Commissioner Justice appointee.
Anne Marie Brooks, municipal elected official appointee.
Mike Twitty, Constitutional Officers appointee.
Doug Thomas, SGR facilitator.
And Mr. Vose, you want to introduce yourself as the attorney?
Sure. Wade Vose, General Counsel.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. We do have a public comment card, so we'll move to the public comment section of the agenda. First, we have Ms. Barbara Hazelton. Ms. Hazelton, you'll have 3 minutes, and just come on up to the podium up here. And I believe, does she have to turn on the microphone, or is it already on for her? Do we know? It's live. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Look, I thought that kind of looks like a microphone too. Yes, my name is Barbara Hazelton, and I'm sure Mr. Voss cannot believe he sees me here. I was here 8 years ago on the same subject, which is term limits for county commissioners. And to just guard my time, last year, after Commissioner Eggers brought up term limits at the county commission meeting, we were getting ready to launch a citizens initiative. I was heading that up. And so we waited to see what the county commission was going to do. And by the time it kind of got buttered around over the period of 2 or 3 months, I did go ahead and contract an attorney and filed for a citizens initiative. And we had people engaged all over the county and it was based off of the 2020 election. So there were 710,000 roughly registered voters at that time, and we had to get 8%. Bottom line is that we, with the overage that you need, it was like 70,000 petitions. That's a pretty hefty lift for any group. And so we went out months, and we had people from all over the county, Democrats and Republicans, that were helping us. And I thought to myself, I was going to mention to you that one of the events that we went to, we were going to all kinds of fairs and events and so on and so forth, and door to door, and people could not wait to sign. 8 years is enough for county commissioners. Democrats, Republicans alike. And for instance, one weekend we did the Green Thumb Festival downtown St. Pete, which is pretty heavily populated by Democrats. At one point, we had people standing in line at a plant festival to sign the petition because we had the sign on the table. And we got 1,000 petitions in one day at the Green Thumb Festival for 8 is enough. Now, I have these all in my garage, believe it or not. They're boxed up, and they're so precious. Every one of them is so precious that they're in boxes in my garage. And the term limit team have said at some point, we're going to get wheelbarrows and bring them in so you all can see. This is what the citizens want. They voted for it in this county 25 years ago. We all know that story. And it all got overturned by, those in charge managed to overturn it. And that was citizens. And here we have citizens again. But I'm here to tell you that the people, the Democrats, the Republicans alike, they want 8 years. If it's enough for a president, it's enough for the county commission in Pinellas County, Florida. And I will say to you that our team entered every single one of those petitions into a database. We have them all. We have contact with all of those thousands of people. So please, each of you vote for 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hazelton. Do we have any other members of the public who would like to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, and we will be addressing the ability of Zoom comments here with Mr. Thomas in a moment. So for those watching online that want to participate down the road, we are working on that. Mr. Thomas will address that. We're on to agenda item 4, which is the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from the September 20th meeting? So I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 5A, background housekeeping information, CRC member email address migration update, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I trust by now everyone's at least received my emails about the migration process. We've been working with BTS, and as of yesterday afternoon, they had migrated those email addresses that you all issued as part of your CRC responsibilities. You can now move them into your respective platforms, whether that's Apple or Google or Exchange or whatever platform you use. I did ask if there was some instructions. I was able to move mine around yesterday and just kind of figured it out. But I asked if there were any instructions. Because of the multitude of platforms that are out there, there's no set instructions that county BTS staff has for you. But I did give you a contact information number that you can call because I suspect every device I used, I had to do something different to get there. So I suspect you may encounter that as well. So I apologize. We don't have anything more formalized to let you know that. I know, Senator, you'd ask, but there is that resource. For those of you who haven't seen it, that telephone number, if you need to take it down for the BTS for technical support, is 727-453-4357. And hopefully they can get you set up and make that a little easier for communication so you don't have to log in each time to gain your information. So just on a quick head check, did everybody get the emails that I had sent out yesterday and then again today? Good news. Okay, super. I want to make sure that we've got everybody covered in that regard. So the other piece that the chair had asked me to speak on is the ability, I think Commissioner Eggers had asked us if there was an ability to allow people to participate via Zoom for comments and to chime in with public comments and things of that nature. We have worked on it. We have a working draft that has been circulated with staff. This is, I know this always sounds simple, but by the time you get a lot of people involved and all the technology involved, it's a little more complex. What we've tried to do is parrot what the County Board of Commissioners have used for their system, but they're set up a little differently with dedicated personnel at certain times and dedicated email addresses and things of that nature. So we have a working draft that's going through that with staff that will be involved in helping make that happen. We have another meeting on Friday to hopefully kind of cross the T's and dot the I's, and so I would anticipate by our next meeting we have that resolved and we'll have that information available on the website as well. It's just been one of those logistical issues similar to the emails. It's just we've got to work through the technology factors. But we're definitely on track with that.
So just for clarification, for the next meeting, you're not anticipating it being available, but will be available for discussion for the subsequent meeting, or?
That I'll know more by Friday.
Okay.
We're meeting Friday morning, and depending on how the list of people involved keeps getting a little bigger, but by the time we get that resolved, I will update everybody in my next email to you whether it will be live or whether we'll be one more meeting away before it becomes operational.
Well, it clearly is done now, so there's a way to do it.
Yeah,
Just a matter of
exactly. We just have to work through getting the technology and the people and the places all together.
Okay,
So
thank
keep you
you.
in the loop, but I didn't want to let you know that it's still in process. We're just working through the logistics of it. Okay. And then I think that's it I had for housekeeping items, and then we'll be back later to talk about the topics. But
And so 5B, was that covering the Zoom issue, or?
that was the Zoom issue,
Okay.
yes, for participation. Right now, it is available. People can watch it on stream, but if they wanted to participate via Zoom, we've got to get the technology and all the logistics coordinated for that.
Okay, and just to be clear for the public, the intention is for this board to follow the same rules that the Board of County Commissioners follows for virtual participation and comments. So if you are familiar with that process, I know it's on the county website. There's a process for signing up to make those comments, and we will be happy to use that same system, and hopefully it'll be here before the end of the year, and certainly before we get into making any decisions, which will certainly be sometime next year. Any questions regarding agenda item 5? Any comments, concerns? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 6. This was feedback from various Pinellas County officials regarding possible topics or amendments that this board would consider based on the experiences of those officials. And the first one was the Board of County Commissioners. And I know we'd asked Commissioner Eggers, who is the board's liaison, to communicate that to the board.
Yeah, we reached out with obviously all the minutes that we've had, and suggested that they have a number of avenues to communicate their thoughts to this board. They can communicate with any of you individually. We can communicate at a workshop, at a county commission workshop. They can come here and just as Barbara Hazelton did tonight, and talk about any issues that are on their mind. So there's a lot of ways they can communicate. And as you said, or we said in the very beginning, the county commission could actually put things totally separate from the work that's being done here. So there's a number of ways for them to engage, and I'll continue to communicate what we do here through our minutes to them, and offer opportunities at workshops. So I think we're all set.
Very good. And certainly want to make sure the commissioners know that we value their input, and that they have an active opportunity to give that to us, and also respecting that they have the ability to also put amendments on the ballot directly themselves. And the next one was for constitutional officers. Property Appraiser Twitty is their liaison. Wanted to give you an opportunity to let us know the dialogue so far with the other constitutional officers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had a conversation with the constitutionals and relayed the proposals that have been made, to this point for talking purposes. So gave them a feel of those, and they didn't have any new proposals to bring forward at this time.
Okay, very good. The last area that I'd asked us to look at and mention was county staff, administration, county attorney. So, I'm sure they know that this process is going on, obviously, and they'd be able to let us know anything that they saw. But technical amendments, things that have changed in the law or things that have changed in practice. Has there been any communication with either the county attorney? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vos.
Thank you, Chairman. I spoke with the county attorney last week relating to one of the items you're going to get to in the topics you'll be discussing tonight, relating to the county attorney provision. In particular, I think there was a discussion of perhaps Ms. White coming and speaking with you all to discuss that matter and see what she thinks about it. And she communicated to me she'd be glad to do it, subject to figuring out how the schedule could work. So the county attorney would be glad to come and speak with you all concerning that matter. She did generally state that I think they may have had a technical amendment bouncing around in their heads within the office. She didn't get into particulars with me about it, but I can report back further on that at your next meeting in a couple of weeks.
Very good. That'd be great. And so we'll have a standing invitation for the county attorney based on scheduling, however y'all want to schedule that between Mr. Thomas and Mr. Vos, for her to present to us, hopefully in the next couple months.
Sounds good.
And then with respect to the administration, I have spoke to the county administrator and also the assistant county administrator, as well as Nancy. And so my understanding is there's some discussions going on with the staff to determine if there's anything there. So I don't have anything to report at this stage, but that's in process as well.
Very good. Any questions, comments on item 6? All right, moving on to item 7, proposed CRC major groupings of topics advanced to date. So I asked Mr. Thomas and Mr. Vos to kind of organize us a little bit. I feel like the first few meetings were generative in nature, trying to come up with ideas, topics, areas of interest. And obviously now it's important to start focusing particularly our professional staff on how they're going to spend their time and our resources on implementing those conversations and facilitating those conversations. And so I asked Mr. Thomas to kind of group together similar proposals or proposals that are connected to specific areas of the charter so that we can kind of do it in an organized manner. And I believe that in your agenda packets for this item, there is a 2-page, really page and a quarter of proposed groupings. And so Mr. Thomas, if you're prepared to, and I don't know, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Vos, whoever wants to take the lead on certain areas, if you want to go through those and maybe help us give you a little bit of direction. And I think one of the things we're looking for from this board tonight is maybe some priorities, particularly for near-term priorities versus long-term priorities. Certain items might take a little longer and might be a little more involved in terms of researching constitutional law and case law and things like that, Mr. Vose can certainly expound on that much better than I can. But that was the point of this agenda item. So I guess I'll turn it over to Mr. Thomas to start the discussion.
Sure, and I think Wade and I can probably tag team this as necessary going forward. As the chair had indicated, what we have done to date in our first several meetings is simply solicit feedback and input from you as CRC members. And so at the first couple meetings, a variety of topics were raised, and we've tried to articulate what we believe we understood the commenters to be raising and try to tie bar that to a particular section of the charter. And then at our last meeting, in addition to the first two feedback sessions we had received at the last meeting, Wade went through an overview of the charter, and several other topics came into play that we've tried to capture in this document. And so what we've tried to do through the efforts is to group them basically into what I call 4 different areas. The first one being governance, of how the organization is structured and governed overall. A number of you raised some topics under cleanup issues. We're just kind of removing pronouns and his and hers and things of that nature as well. And then there were a variety of what we thought were possible new issues that could be raised that we just put under that bucket. And then lastly, there were some just questions that were raised that we weren't sure if they were necessarily items that needed a charter review advanced ballot initiative, so to speak, but simply as Wade and I and the chair had reviewed what had come to date, felt that they were more like, I just don't understand this, so let's spend some time to make sure we understood what that looked like. So hopefully we've categorized these appropriately in terms of the areas that we've just put in these 4 different major groupings. But as the chair has indicated, at some point we got to start to get into the meat of the process here and start to unpack what these issues look and feel like and have some dialogue about what you're looking to accomplish so that we can do our work to help bring you either subject matter experts or legal analysis or the benefit of what else is happening in other charters that may have taken place elsewhere in the state. So we can at least learn from the things that worked or didn't work from them. So we've not prioritized any of these, just simply categorized them in these various buckets. And what we thought we could spend some time with tonight, because each of these all came from one or more of you in the effort, that we could maybe have a bit of a conversation about each of the topics so we can get a sense of, do we fully understand what exactly is being discussed? And then second of all, what's kind of the temperature of the board as a whole as far as how does that shake out in priorities? Because some of these are going to require more priority and more research and background work for us to prepare than others that might be pretty quickly and kind of can check off the list fairly easily. So with that as a background, before I kind of jump into it, I'll turn it over to Wade if he has anything you'd like to add or elaborate on that approach.
No, thank you, Doug. As Doug said, these are not set forth in any list of priority or anything like that, and it's possible one or more of these might need to be moved around. Maybe it belongs in a different bucket, if you will, here as well. So we want to encourage that discussion and feedback to get our higher priority items to the top so that we can start using the resources we have to go forward on it. Chairman, would you like us to plow through some of these to just bring them up or
Sure.
see what folks want to discuss?
Yeah,
or?
maybe we should just take them in the order you have them here. Commissioner Eggers, did you have a thought?
Sorry, because being a little thick-headed here, I'm not sure I caught your 4 areas. You said, and maybe you said there was 4 primary areas you were going to focus on. One was governance, and you jumped right into cleanup issues. Is that a second area that?
So I'm sorry, I just covered the 4 areas.
Okay, so if you could hit me with those again, please. I want to make sure I have got those.
Absolutely, apologize for that. The four buckets or areas that Wade and I thought these all fell under. The first was governance issues, and we'll work our way through those topics. The second was cleanup issues. The third was possible new issues that weren't necessarily in the charter in the past. And the last category that we used, the fourth, was just, we called it questions to be addressed. There were issues and just concerns, but not necessarily an initiative that would necessarily result in a new ballot issue.
Okay, and just one question from the 2016 CRC that was there, testified for term limits at that point. And just gave my input, and then at some point along the way, the CRC needed to make a motion and have a second for discussion purposes on an issue to move forward, and on that particular issue, there was no second. And so it didn't move forward for discussion. So I'm just wondering how, as we move forward on topics, is that kind of the way,
So,
I just want to make sure that,
so back in 2016, the way the Charter Review Commission worked at that time, their process was very regimented. I would suggest to you the most regimented among any of the Charter Review Commissions I've represented statewide. It's not a bad thing, but they were very particular with their process, what step in the process, and so on. And it came to be, as you said, at some point within that process, for any further consideration, they needed to get, at the very least, a motion and a second to have further consideration of it, and so on. At this point here, you all have adopted rules of procedure, but you have not adopted incredibly articulated method of proceeding. And I don't know that you necessarily need to get into the weeds of that initially. I think at the outset here, we're just trying to kind of funnel it a little bit. Get in everything and then see what the consensus of the commission is to get to what the top priorities are. If we get to the point where we've got a fair bit of disagreement, we need to get a lot more regimented, then that's something we can get to.
Okay, and does everyone have the agenda item, the 2 pages here? Because this is what we're going to be working off of. No? Does anybody have any extra copies, or can we put it on the screen somehow?
Let's see if we can get it on
If we could get it on the screen, that would probably be helpful.
technical staff able to get a PDF on the screen. We can email it to them if nothing else. While we're waiting, Chairman, if you don't mind, while we're waiting, Commissioner, the very first item on the list, actually, I believe, if I recall correctly, was a matter you had brought up, and we had it down here as definition clarification of county commissioner at-large districts. And could you remind me and remind us a little bit precisely what direction of clarification you were thinking on concerning that, or do you recall?
well, it came up during the redistricting groups that we put together, and where the folks, the at-large commissioners, could choose a representative from. As you know, each of the at-large commissioners must live in one of 3 areas, but they represent the entire county.
Right.
So when they make selections, are they to make selections just within the area that they live, or can they make selections for their appointees from county? From the whole county?
So in particular, it's directed to the question of appointments.
Yeah, it's really
Very
that
good.
was the bulk of it. Yeah, in fact, that was the only question that came up at the county commission. What was the reference on that? And that's what that was really all about. And they said cool. They just needed some clarification on that point. Not even sure it's a charter issue, but I just wanted to have that in there for conversation.
Thank you very much for that. And I think what we might do on that one, I would offer to the commission is, with that additional specificity, I think that gives me enough to grab onto to be able to advise the commission whether I think that's something that's a tweak of language in the charter, or whether it happens to be something in your code, for example.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, do you want to go through? So we just talked about, starting to talk about governance issues, and Commissioner Eggers just provided some clarification to Attorney Vos about the first topic, which he'd asked to be looked at, which relates to the fact that our at-large county commissioners have a geographic area in which they must live, but they are elected countywide. So districts 1 through 3 are on the ballot, and all of the electors vote for them but they have to live in either District 1, 2, or 3. And so the question is, when they're making appointments, are their constituents considered to be people that live in District 1, 2, or 3, or are they anyone? Are any other questions or comments on that topic? Okay, Mr. Thomas, you want to move on to the next topic in the governance discussion?
Certainly, and I know that's an item that has already come up this evening on a couple of occasions, so I suspect there'll be some thoughts and discussions on this point, and that had to do with term limits for county commissioners. Why I'm at this point, I also wanted to highlight that we did receive 2 emails through the generic CRC email box, both in essence, I'll verbalize, you've got copies of those emails, but basically paraphrase that they are both supporting an 8-year term limitation issue. So I wanted you to make sure that we have had some public comment or feedback on that in addition to the speaker that came in this evening. So I know this is a topic that has a lot of history in this county, as has already been discussed, but I know that we've certainly understood that it would be a matter of probably important discussion from this board. So I guess we can open it up to there, because a number of you have raised this issue, as have some of your constituents as well.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a topic we want to discuss and consider. Are you looking for any additional feedback at this time, or just that?
No, I think if we could just kind of work through these first initially and make sure that everybody's kind of understands what the issue is, and to make sure there's clarity on it from all the board members, and then maybe we come back and say, okay, now that we know what this looks like, where do we think we want to put our first energy, and which ones are going to likely require some more time from Wade, myself, and other speakers to do the background. So I think if we can just kind of work through this initially list to make sure we have a firm understanding and clarification first.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So term limits, everybody kind of understands, I assume, at this point. We may have different thoughts about where you land. That's certainly part of the next conversations. So the next topic was some questions about the appointment and removal of the county attorney. If you went back through and looking at the charter was very specific as it related to the county administrator in terms of appointment and processes and reviews and removal processes. But they were not as articulated under this particular section. So as I recall, when the comment came up, it was like, they're both appointed officials. Why would one have a different feel, a look and feel than the other? That was the take that I certainly walked away with it from there. But I'll open it up to the floor if there were other thoughts or opinions on that.
Could I interject something, Mr. Chair? So I just want to, just for a point of information and so everybody understands, the way the county administrator is hired is different than the county attorney, and the administrator is hired strictly by the Board of County Commissioners, whereas because of a charter amendment, I believe 8 years ago, the charter was amended to include the constitutional officers as part of the makeup of the board that basically sits and reviews the county attorney each year. So that's a simple majority vote on whether to retain or not.
Yes, sir. Okay. So essentially this topic is just to review that which was amended last time.
And I don't think it's in the charter what that is. So I do think that from a hiring standpoint, it's been a majority. Clearly on removing the county administrator, that has a little higher threshold. So I didn't see it in the charter for the county attorney. So I may have missed that.
The threshold, and what I took, Commissioner, from this item when we had fleshed it out a little bit further when I did a review of the entire charter, there was, of course, there is a distinction between County Commission hires and fires the county administrator, County Attorney Oversight Committee, which is the county commission plus the 5 constitutional officers, hire and fire the county attorney, but it's different thresholds to fire, essentially. For the county administrator, it takes a supermajority to do it at one given meeting, or a majority vote of the full commission at 2 consecutive meetings. And I think the thought was to discuss whether or not a similar standard might obtain there. So the language that you find in the county attorney provision concerning termination is this piece, very common provision, although it sounds a little lackadaisical, very common in codes and charters, states that the county attorney is selected by the county attorney oversight committee and then gives the makeup of it, and then states that the county attorney who shall serve at the pleasure of the county attorney oversight committee. That means majority vote any single time, anytime they're meeting, that person is gone. At the pleasure of means gone, cause, no cause, what have you.
Yeah, and in that case, there's 12 members, so.
So it would take seven.
Seven. So I just thought it was good to have the conversation about it. Maybe it stays the way it is, and maybe we adjust it, but that was the reason behind that.
Very good. Any other comments on that topic or questions? Okay.
Okay. And then there was a topic that we characterize as elected county administrator / county executive. There are certain places, both here in the state and elsewhere, that have elected executives at the county level. You are currently operating under what is generally referred to as a commission manager form of government, where the commission appoints a county administrator in this case, and the county administrator is largely responsible for day-to-day functions of the city, or of the county, excuse me, with the exception of the responsibilities of the constitutional officers in their respective operations. So it's a significant difference in governance structure. But we assumed everybody understood what that comment was, but we just want to make sure there was a common understanding of that before we get into discussions of where your priorities may rest. Everybody clear on what was advanced there? Okay.
Chairman?
Yes.
I can offer just a little bit more. Just happens to be I have some additional information relating to that topic at my immediate fingertips. I think I mentioned I'm general counsel for the Orange County Charter Review Commission as well this time around, done it previously as well. Orange County, I think I may have mentioned before, is unique in the state in that it has an elected county mayor, and it's unique even among those counties in the state with an elected county mayor, because there are 3. The county mayor in Orange County is both the chief executive and sits on, votes on, and is the chair of the county commission. All right? That is unique. Not even Miami-Dade or Jacksonville or Duval County have that. The Orange County Charter Review Commission is exploring whether to make a change to that right now. In particular, they're exploring whether or not to make the county mayor there just the elected executive and not also on the county commission, the legislative body. As a result of that, they've had me put together some information about some of the other quote-unquote strong mayor jurisdictions in the state of Florida, both county and city. And so I just happened to have put together earlier this week a memorandum for them that lays out some basic information about all the strong mayor jurisdictions with a population over 100,000 in the state of Florida. There are not many of them. There are only 9. But so that information is available if any members of the CRC are curious about it. It's just one of the many pieces of the puzzle when evaluating having an elected executive in a city or a county.
It would probably be good for us at some point, maybe if you do a memorandum for us with just that information, that would be helpful. I see that you've done a memorandum for this meeting regarding the CPI issue.
That was an old memorandum I did for the Brevard County Charter Review Commission, actually, on a very related issue. But
Okay,
yes.
very good.
And to that point, there's some additional material through the International City County Management Association, which would have information about, similar to the type of statistics that Wade had just raised about cities and counties over different population size and different forms of governments. And so we would envision that as that topic comes in, we would have a variety of information available for you for presentation and discussion, deliberation. So those are some of these issues obviously will require a whole lot more background with a whole lot more material available for conversation than some of the others that are pretty simple. So
Okay.
yep. Okay. The next category we flagged were what we called cleanup issues. First one was pretty straightforward, removing his and her and pronouns. I think that's one that Wade can quickly, probably, I say quickly, it will take a review of the process, but certainly identify those. That's an easy one to check off, generally speaking. And then there was also a provision or a request that since this charter had been reviewed last, a variety of state actions have taken place, state laws, legislation, things of that nature, or whatever referendums that may have been approved. And does anything that has occurred since the charter was last updated need to be revised to get in conformance with current state law? So that, once again, largely a legal question more than a policy question, but I'm sure that we'll work our way through that as Wade goes through the changes in state law that have occurred since your last amendments.
And Chairman, I can very briefly address that, and I'll be addressing it further at a future meeting. I think when this question had come up before, my general response had been, not really, not that I can think of. I am on a lead on one issue that I'm digging a little bit deeper into, but I need to button up some pieces of that issue, and I'll be coming back to you to discuss it with you. Just wanted to let you know because I had said previously, no, I didn't think there was anything. There's something I'm digging in further down the rabbit hole on, and I'll be reporting to you all later.
You want to just give us a brief description of what that issue is?
Sure.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it actually relates to something that was put in 2016 by the 2016 Charter Review Commission, emulating what is found in a lot of county charters throughout the state. It has to do with the financial impact statements on the ballot. It would appear, based on a recent Division of Elections opinion, that at least a portion of that requirement, and that is the portion that a financial impact statement be put on the ballot, not that one be put together, but the one be put on the ballot might be inconsistent with and preempted by state election law. This was something that was discussed back in 2016 and evaluated, and based on the state of the law at the time, we thought it looked fine. There was a Supreme Court opinion, actually a couple Supreme Court opinions, I'll tell you the full story of it later, that first said that prior thinking was the right way of thinking, and then the Supreme Court changed its mind and came down a different way. And as a result, the Division of Elections now has taken a look at other issues like this and is leaning in favor of thinking it might be preempted. So in any event, I've got to dig further into all that and what some of the implications of that are going to be, and I'll be reporting back further.
Just a quick question. I'm assuming you're talking as it relates to county commission?
I'm speaking in particular about any charter amendment put on the ballot.
Okay. And
Yeah,
okay. Because every issue that we have has financial implications. But
Of
you're
course,
talking about
absolutely.
Any of these ballot issues, what financial implications?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's directed specifically to a requirement in Pinellas' charter, in Broward's charter, in a number of different charters that states that there must be a separate financial impact statement printed on the ballot under the item so that folks can see that financial impact statement. It's directed just to that piece, the printing on the ballot.
Okay, so we'll look forward to hearing more about that, unless there's any other questions at the moment on that. Okay, Mr. Thomas.
Okay, the next topic was Section 2.07 in the charter entitled Environmental Lands. And as I recall, I think Commissioner Eggers, you were in the process, the county's in the process of maybe looking at some additional environmental lands. Some of the lands are articulated specifically in the charter. There is some language that talks about how that can be added, but I think there was kind of an emerging issue that was taking place with some potential new acquisitions, and how do we make sure that we capture those as we're going through this charter review committee process?
Under cleanup, that's all.
Just under cleanup? Okay, gotcha. All right.
And actually, Chairman, Commissioners, had some additional information to add concerning that one. And I might recommend at some point you might move this item from cleanup to kind of your questions category, and it might be questions, with answers or explanation of it. I didn't want to definitively opine on this matter as I was standing up there going through the entire charter when we had a big text block in front of me to remember precisely what it meant, but I had a chance to look into it further. and confirm that my thinking was consistent with the county attorney's office's thinking on it. The way Section 2.07 was set up in the charter was precisely to be so that there did not have to be charter amendments to add to the list of environmentally protected lands every single time, okay? It is set up in the charter such that when lands, in addition to those that are initially listed here, are acquired and then designated as environmental lands pursuant to the charter, pursuant to an ordinance, then they are locked in on that list and they do not come in, they don't not come out of the protections of 2.07 in the charter unless it's approved at referendum, okay? So there is no requirement at all to add additional lands to the charter this time or any additional time, any time in the future for it to have all those protections. It was specifically written so you didn't have to do that, so that it was automatic.
As long as they're referenced as environmental lands in the purchase that we make, they would automatically fall under this protection.
It's actually designated as environmental lands by the adoption of an ordinance by the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay.
So once that's done, you can't undo that by ordinance.
Whether it's in this or not.
Exactly. It's a one-way street without a referendum. So I would suggest it was set up specifically so that the Charter Review Commission or anyone else did not have to amend the charter to add it to the list. It's already set up that way so it goes in, can't come out. So just a thought for everyone.
So does that answer that question, and can we remove it from the list, or do you want to have more information on that topic and move it to the questions to be addressed category? Sounds like it answers it to me, but it's up to y'all.
I can tell you, I've got, and Wade, with your concurrence, the section 2.07, subparagraph C, it's a simple statement. It says additional county-owned lands may be designated as environmental lands subject to the provisions of this charter by adoption of an ordinance by the Board of County Commissioners, which is what you're.
That's what I was referencing.
And then the second section talking you remove, but it takes an ordinance adjustment. It has to be ratified by your voters.
Is everybody okay with considering that question answered and taking it off the list for purposes of narrowing and focusing?
And Chairman,
Yes.
what I was going to recommend with regard to, and particularly down in the list of questions to be answered as well, keep in mind as you're working through your work, you're kind of building the pieces of your final report, and that documents the matters you've discussed, and then if matters have come up and you've discussed it or looked into it further and found, this is handled and it's handled this way, so folks can see that that's the case. I would suggest this might be a matter that might be moved to the questions and then put in questions answered, and that those would be things we would document in the final report.
I think I'm seeing consensus to move it to the questions and approach it the way that Attorney Vos has suggested. Okay? All right, consensus.
Okay. The next one is section 605. This came up during our second meeting when Wade was going through the charter, and at the end of the current charter, section 605 was a reconstitution of the 2004 Charter Review Commission. Sorry,
Mr. Thomas, I think we skipped 502, 5.02B. The boards and commissions that.
Oh, I'm sorry. My
okay.
apologies. I apologize now. I moved on. This 502 Special Laws B. This incorporated a variety of special groups. Let me grab my charter here.
And Doug, do you want this is an in the weeds one even for me? Do you want me to handle this one?
Sure,
real
Wade,
quick?
go ahead.
I'd be glad to. So I have been to address this matter because I don't want to. On this matter, just flippantly advise you, don't worry about updating this list. They updated it 8 years ago. I am re-immersing myself and gotten big stacks electronically of documents from the county attorney's office again, re-immersing myself in all the spider web of special acts that still apply to Pinellas County to tease out all these different boards, that were created by special act, the ones that are on this list, the ones that aren't, and so on, and trying to dig back through my prior research on this 8 years ago so I can come back to you with solid recommendations about cleanup of this list, additions to this list, things that are the same, things that are apples and lawn chairs, et cetera, because that list is a very it's a very interesting one legally. There are a lot of different things going on among the different special acts that created them. So I would still suggest it's ultimately a cleanup issue, but just wanted to let you know I'm doing some digging there so I can come back and give you all, from a legal standpoint, more definitive recommendation as to which ones it might be. And by the way, you all here on the commission are boots on the ground in the county these last many decades, and I know you all have a great deal of experience with a number of these boards and so on. If there are any boards in particular that were created by special act that you think should be on that list and somehow aren't, please let the full CRC or let me know so that I can zero in on those.
Commissioner Overend, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we were to go that route, Mr. Rose, because what I didn't hear you say is the deletion of the section. So if we're to go that route of updating, researching, finding out what's relevant, there's even, there's a board in 5.02 subsection B that's, whose elimination is being considered right now by the Pinellas County Legislative Delegation.
Mm-hmm.
So that means every 8 years, the CRC would be going through the same activity, or it could be deleted, right? Or could we at least update this cleanup issue list, Mr. Thomas, to reflect not just updating the list to make sure that we know that the subsection is out of date, not comprehensive, but at least that we're not forgetting to consider removing it in its totality so that it's just gone, doesn't need to be updated again?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is like, this is essentially a tautology, right? I mean, the charter is not allowed to restrict or any way affect these special act created special districts. And a sentence that just says that maybe is easier than listing out these boards that have changed over the last 20 plus 30 years. Or, I mean, it's really an unnecessary provision. Obviously, when voters are looking at their ballot language, they're not going to have that information.
Sure.
So they might vote no. I don't want to eliminate these boards from the charter. But I think that the issue is that the way it's worded now, it's already completely outdated. And it's not going to be possible for the county or the Charter Review Commission to have an accurate list every year and update it every year. So either simplifying it to just say what the law is, that we can't amend these districts or eliminate them through the charter as just a general statement, probably is the easiest way to go. But
if we're going to do that, is it worth considering putting together kind of an overarching set of guidelines for use in the future if some entity in the county wants to set up a special activity, at least have some consistency from now on in terms of the way these things look?
they're created by the legislature. So do you want to maybe explain? I mean, probably what we need to do is have this conversation at a further meeting when you can present it and explain it.
And that's why I'm getting my head back into all of it to help facilitate that discussion to that, because again, these are creatures of the legislature, which means we are very much with our hands tied to address particulars of them. And
I was
Chairman,
assuming some of them were done here through the commission.
Yeah. And Chairman, to your point, part of my digging into it and going through the list and looking at all of it is to double check my very broad, bold assertion, which is generally true, but there are always exceptions. Generally true, as I said at the last meeting, that the charter couldn't fool with any of these matters created by these boards created by special act. I need to go through each of them, even if quickly, just to confirm to myself that there isn't some weird exception sitting in there. And once I do, I can come back and tell you, yep, I looked through all of them, and it's merely a tautology, and to remove it would not change anything.
We'll just keep it on the list for a more robust presentation on this entire topic. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And Mr.
All right.
Chair, the other piece that I think I've heard the commissioner say is that if something is dissolved, to make sure we're proactive, that not only it's established by a special act, but if it's dissolved at some point, that we're not having to clean it up. I think that's what you were getting at as well, right? Okay, duly noted.
So if all of these things are established by our legislature, why are they in the charter?
So this is at least in part, and again, I'd be able to tell you a little bit more, and this is speculation on history, okay? You have to remember, charter law was not as fully well formed out way back when the charter was being first proposed, and the Florida Supreme Court at that time took a very expansive view of charter county power. It was a prevailing view back then that county charters could fool with boards that were created by special act if those boards were created by special act without a referendum. This is based on particular language that's in the Florida Constitution. The Florida Supreme Court has not held with that view in subsequent decades. What I think this provision was at that time was a reassurance to probably interests within the county that the passage of this charter is not going to affect your board or this commission or this whatever. That's speculation on my part, but I think that's what it was.
I think we just had there was a special act for a Seminole recreation district that we went to the state legislature to have them give us the ability to, look at that. So it wasn't even, it's not even listed here in the list of special acts, but right. to the point, we couldn't do it without the legislature granting us.
And by the way, you just named one of the ways there could be an exception to my broad statement that generally a county charter can't fool with a board or commission created by a special act if that special act said that the county charter or that the county commission could legislate with regard to that board, then it could, unless the county charter restricted it from it. And I have seen special acts that say such and such county commission can further regulate this board by ordinance. It's rare, but that's what I need to go peek through.
Better you than me.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, any other questions on that topic? Okay, Mr. Thomas?
Okay. The next topic that came up under this category was Section 605, a reconstitution of the 2004 Charter Review Commission. As I recall, when Wade was going through the overview of the charter, a question came up about we're now well beyond the 2004, and I know that he wanted to have a chance to review that as well, so it was just put on the list as well. So I don't know, Wade, if you have any further comment on that, or we still need to do some research on that one.
I did a little further digging. I couldn't remember why it wasn't taken out in cleanup the last time around, other than I don't know that there was, Tom, maybe you remember, there wasn't sufficient political interest or will to do it, but I can't suggest to you any legal reason why it should remain.
I think it was just looked at as part of the commission, the charter, and we didn't see any reason to take it out at the time.
What we've heard is can we do the research to determine if it needs to stay in this round so that whatever you advance maybe cleans that up. So, okay. All right. The next category then were possible new issues. So we just put these based on as they came to us. And there was a generic statement raised from, I think, a couple of you about are there any emerging issues and what other counties may be considering or doing with their respective charters. I know Wade's involved in several of these as well. I think what you'll find is that most of the time, just as this issue is a locally driven issue, many of the items that you see happening in other charters across the county are going to be driven by the local dynamics and politics and issues that are facing that. So, but that being said, the question came, is there something out there we should be gleaning potentially to look for in other charter review processes or things that have occurred since the Pinellas County Charter Review Commission last met? So, any other comment that you have on that, Wade?
I think I might have said that one, and if y'all don't have any, then I'm satisfied with taking it off the list. If something comes to mind, let us know. And this is also to say, we have a lot of work to do, so if a new issue comes up, or if y'all want to introduce another topic, this isn't to say that we're not going to consider anything else. It's just to try to focus on what the next steps are. So this isn't going to be exclusive to anything else that we talk about.
And Chairman, as Doug said, I follow charter amendment issues throughout the state, and I would characterize each of them as being very driven by local particular interest, needs, issues. So I wouldn't see any statewide trends.
The next one, I believe the Vice Chair had raised on human rights about consideration of adding sexual orientation and gender identity protection in the charter.
I did add, and maybe I just said it too fast. I'm from the Midwest, so I talk really fast. But I did want to add appearance to that too. But I did notice, I did a little bit of research on my own and noticed that Hillsborough County has added these categories to their provision on human rights. So it wouldn't necessarily be a, Pinellas County is standing in the stream kind of thing. So.
And I'm sorry, did you say appearance? I really want to make sure I understood it properly. Okay. All right.
Sorry. So human rights, Pinellas County Human Rights covers this, I believe. State of Florida, I'm sure, has some protections. I guess I would ask that question since they dictate a lot anyway to us. So even if we said, oh, we don't want to do that, it's still covered. Is it necessary to be in the charter? And it's part of the provision of the state, part of the provision of the county commission, human rights. I'm just wondering about that.
So I can tell you, having taken a peek when this matter came up, I took a peek in the Pinellas County's current code of ordinances with regard to a number of different protections relating to employment discrimination, housing and public accommodation discrimination, which are the primary types of discrimination that local governments, if they get into any sort of policing of that outside of their own internal policies and so on, it's those subject matters. And in those, when I took a look at it, it already has protections for sexual orientation and then what is defined in the code here as gender, and then the definition of gender is about 6 or 7 lines long, which encompasses, and I apologize, encompassed appearance, and encompassed gender expression, I believe that was another term, and number of different permutations of that wording throughout the current Pinellas Code. I can tell you from a federal level, if I'm remembering correctly, and I don't play with this every single day, but current interpretations from the EEOC are that the term sex encompasses sexual orientation and gender identity. That's not universally interpreted, but that's the current interpretation, I believe, of the EEOC. From a state perspective, I need to look into it a little bit further to see the extent to which pieces of that are incorporated.
Thank you. Along those lines, and just having casually seen federal and it seems there's different groups or classes included in federal versus state versus some of the local jurisdictions. And if that's the case, if that is confirmed, I'm wondering if we don't want to take a look at the wording that we're going to put in the commission, adding to the charter, if we add anything, just to compare what classes are being covered in other areas and how they're being covered. Anyway.
Any other comments or questions on this topic? All right. Charter initiative?
Next topic was under section 602 on the charter initiatives. This deals with citizen-driven initiatives that was raised. This came up as a part of Wade's overview of the charter, and there's a question of this particular charter provision outlines certain thresholds and requirements in order to get signed petitions by registered voters, things of that nature. And the question that was raised was that, is that kind of contemporary, or are there other counties that may be doing something different in terms of the thresholds or the processes? So that's what we understood the responded, or the question to be addressed, but I'll open that up make sure we've interpreted that appropriately.
Yes, Commissioner.
Was that just addressed in the last one, Wade, and lowering the threshold on, I mean, I think Ms. Hazelton brought that up in her.
That's correct. 8 years ago, the 2016 Charter Review Commission put on an amendment which passed, and I don't remember the numbers. I can look it up.
We have
10 to 8.
From 10 to 8.
We do have in our packet the methods to amend charter amendment by petition. And thank you for this information, because what we have is we have a comparison of the makeup, the legislative makeup of the county commissions. We have a comparison of the makeup of an appointed versus as an elected administrator, and then also the methods to amend the charter amendment. And currently in Pinellas, it's 8% of registered electors have to sign the petition, and they have 240 days to gather those petitions. So if we were to look at opening that up, that would be what we would be changing. To me, I think this topic should probably go under governance, since it's, I think it's related to those issues that we have in governance. But I certainly think it's something we should talk about.
I agree.
Okay?
All right.
Chairman, if I could, thank you for teeing that up. The spreadsheet or table that the chairman was just referencing was a PDF that Doug emailed out to you all today. It's actually from the Florida Association of Counties. It's a very useful tool in any county charter review process. It's a comparison of a great deal of relevant provisions in all 20 county charters, and has breakdowns, for example, on the matter of initiative petitions, what the different percentage thresholds are, time limits, and so on. So it's very useful to see what other charter counties are doing. I imagine you'll be looking at it a number of times during this process.
Is everybody okay with moving that topic to governance?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay, and then under some items that we weren't sure if there were something that were being advanced as a revision, potentially could be a revision of the charter, but at least as they were phrased, we thought they were something that at least were questions raised by one or more members of the CRC that required some additional clarification. And so the first one that was under section 4.01 under county administrator, subparagraph C2, there's a term about unclassified employees. We all suspect that has something to do with the various personnel classifications, civil service, and things of that nature. So we'll work with the administration to get a list of what that looks to be. So there's some areas there. So we weren't sure that there was a desire to change anything. It was more just a question to address. So that's one of those items that we can probably get fairly quickly and put it back for the board and determine if there's further interest in doing something differently there.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman. That was mine, but in addition to that, even if it's not changed, or we come up with whatever the appropriate definition is of what an unclassified person is, that line, and maybe it's because it's the educator in me, that last line in that charter, it should be a line by itself. Because when you look at what the county administrator is being charged to do, it's filling vacancies and hiring personnel. That should be another bullet, or number 3, and then it just gets moved down, because the last line says the employment of persons in unclassified positions. It's totally different from the rest of the language above it.
So could that be a cleanup item, Commissioner Strickland? Do you think?
Yeah, I totally think it, but I also question whether or not the county commissioners should have the authority to approve, or I question that as well. But I think someone had mentioned, it may have been Mr. Twitty, that an unclassified, maybe maybe it's the Dougs of the world, I'm not sure, maybe a consultant, right, or something along those
Well,
lines.
usually they would be an at-will employee, so they're called at-will or exempt. So they're not.
I think that's what we were seeking. What does unclassified mean? And then,
And Chairman, I can share, I don't have final resolution on that question yet, but I have discussed the matter with the county attorney, and they are digging through their files because they addressed many moons ago what that word means, and they are tracking down the memo. So it is recognized to be it's not a standard HR term of art, if you will, but they are tracking down precisely what that is, where they dove into that issue and what it means, and we'll be able to report back.
So is this saying that at-will employees that the county administrator fires must be confirmed by us? That's
As I just said,
Sorry.
I'm living behind, as we call, the veil of ignorance here. I don't know what unclassified means. I can make a lot of guesses, but we'll.
Okay.
So we'll keep that for discussion.
Was there clarification on maybe moving that to a cleanup or just?
I would defer to you
We
and
want to
Wade.
unpack it.
Yeah, I would defer to you and Wade on where you think it fits and what information you get.
I would suggest, though, based on we just heard that it's not really addressed just to the question, what does unclassified mean, but potentially, is there, well, I guess, depending on what the term means, you may or may not have an opinion as to whether or not to change it out.
correct.
And if your concern is just structural or grammatical as to that sentence shouldn't be in a,
That's part of it.
Yeah.
The other part is whether our elected officials have the ability to tell the county commissioner yay or nay on a personnel matter. And that's, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
At this point, perhaps cleanup might be the right place to put it. And then, depending on precisely what we get back, that might change the analysis. So I think getting that detail back from the county attorney's office will probably answer a lot of questions.
Appreciate that.
I think maybe as a follow-up, obviously, we're still waiting. We may get some additional information from the administration. They may have some thoughts or opinions on that topic as well that we can use as part of that conversation. Okay? So we're going to leave it under questions for now, what I'm hearing, right? Okay. The next one was a general question about county referendums and whether state law requires charter amendment referenda to be on the general election ballot, or whether it could be on a specific or a different special election ballot that may take place other than the regular November election.
Chair? Yeah, that was mine. Maybe I didn't articulate it properly, but I think that should be under governance issues. Because my question really was not does state law require it, but I know the state legislature modified election law to require that tax referendum be held on general elections as that's defined in Chapter 97. And so my comment was more, should we adopt that in the charter to make sure that charter amendments are only held during general elections as defined by Chapter 97? I know as the charter as it reads, it allows the county commission to take a citizen petition and do a special referendum instead of putting on the general election ballot. So I just think that's something that we should be looking at, and I think it should probably be under governance issues.
Okay.
Okay, so great. So to restate it then, it would be, should charter amendments only be on the general election ballot?
Correct.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. The other topic that came up under this area, number 6, was during the last Charter Review Commission in the report, there was a section that dealt with consolidation of various services, and I believe they were in the public safety arena. And there was a concern that the report conveyed that there was just not sufficient time to fully evaluate that. And so the question was, is that a topic that this group wanted to go back and revisit This may very well reach into some of the other special acts and some of the other groups that we spoke about earlier, but we took it to understood is there an appetite of this board to maybe go back and reevaluate that topic that was not fully vetted out in time at the last CRC process.
That was my understanding as well. It sounded like they had a topic they were interested in and they weren't able to get to it. And it sounds like we were interested in understanding if there were efficiencies or things structurally or systemically that can be updated.
Okay.
Chairman, if you don't mind, and Commissioners, I apologize. Whose item was this? Because I had a question real quick, because I've gone back through and I'm very familiar with the subject matter of, exploring potential consolidation of public services and so on. I couldn't track down a reference in the final report of it being something that they wanted to look further into but couldn't get to it. And I was just trying to track down that piece there, because they had
exploration of the matter, and I had explained to them or discussed with them, and I'd be glad to go through it with you all as well, kind of what the boundaries are under the relevant Florida Supreme Court case law of what you can consolidate or what you can, preempt, if you will, and what you cannot. It's a distinction between regulatory power and services, essentially, and that is not nearly as clear as it might sound. But in any event, does anybody recall, or even if offline, if you could point me to
Yes,
right
I think
direction?
I think that was mine. And it was just more of a curiosity as to what the commission was thinking there. And did they simply just run out of time, or was it not on, high enough on the priority list? There clearly is, I think there's been discussion about consolidation of services throughout the county in the past, and maybe that's where it stopped, because it was a difficult thing to do, as for a number of reasons. So I think it was maybe just an opportunity. Perhaps Mr. Steck could speak to that as to what the thinking was.
I'm afraid I'm using up my time for the next 3 meetings if I keep on talking. And again, I'm shaky on this, but I remember thinking about the fact that some of the smaller cities had hired the sheriff's department to provide police services. And it may have just been one of these things where the commission just didn't want to touch it because it was kind of a difficult issue to deal with. And so that's my recollection.
What I can tell you is, when I look back, when I was trying to understand the nature of the question, the actual report, which I think you have copies of from your earlier meetings, the report to the citizens of Pinellas County, dated June of 2016, under page 8, there was a section dealing with topics reviewed and not recommended for charter amendments, and it was subparagraph 5, which was consolidation of public services, and then there was a state report and a variety of topics. But basically, I think the line that I understood where you were coming from, Commissioner, was the 2015-2016 CRC agreed that the time necessary to gather the information needed to make an informed decision exceeded the time frame under which the 2015-2016 CRC was operating. So I thought that's what you were getting at, that they just simply, it was, whether there was other dynamics involved, it was going to take a mountain of time that they didn't have available.
Yes, Commissioner Overend, did you have a comment?
He found the page.
Okay.
I was going to reference it.
Trying to get the right reference for you there.
But I would, if we have time, I would be interested in looking at that. I know that clarified your question, Commissioner, but we have a lot of time, and if this is the only time that gets reviewed, that might be a good use of time.
Certainly. Commissioner Jennings?
Yeah, I was just going to ask our general counsel if a good place to start on that would be maybe for us to understand what the scope of our authority is, so we have like a basis to understand what exactly we may or may not be able to do.
Chairman, I think that's a good idea, and I was actually digging through my old files. I feel confident I've written, writing it in my head as I'm sitting here thinking, I feel confident I've written this memo before, laying out the distinction between consolidation of services versus preemption of regulatory power. And so I'd be glad to, at one of your future meetings, the next one after that, be glad to give you all an overview of what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, what's arguably on the line, and then you can think about what you might be looking at.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds
that-
good.
That would
Yes.
be helpful, because I'm trying to understand what that might, because the preemptive issue is really it's a big deal, so.
Still being litigated today.
Yeah, so
What's-
I mean, I don't know
what's
what
regulatory
kind of
preemption and what's
services-
consolidation of a service.
Yeah, I don't know what that really means or what you have in mind, but I can't imagine.
I'd be glad to,
that
to
topic.
give you all an overview and discussion of it.
Thank you.
And the other item that has come up was to explore the possibility of consider limiting annual increases in the county's budget to a CPI or some other index, and were there other counties doing that in some way, shape, or form? And so I know Wade's not necessarily prepared to do a full-blown exploration of that tonight, but he certainly had some background information from previous work that might be helpful to at least be part of this conversation.
Yes, and Chairman, this is a matter I seem to recall was actually brought up to staff, Doug, in discussions afterwards. Is that because
I'm sorry, yes, this came to me as a separate member, as
Right.
I was having conversations about verifying meeting dates and things of that nature. So it didn't come at this meeting, but came from a member, yes.
Yes. And yeah, I'm glad to get into the weeds if we want to, but perhaps the CRC commissioner who brought it up may want to discuss the general.
Yeah, I brought it up just in passing when Mr. Thomas called me about rescheduling the meeting. I believe it was brought up at the county commission meeting recently about the concern with the kind of runaway increases in the county budget. It's gone up almost 12% a year. It's doubled in the last 4 or 5 years, I believe. It's on track to double in another 4 or 5 years. So what could be done to kind of handicap that? And the thought that several people had expressed to me was, what if not the millage rate, but the budget itself was limited by some sort of index like the CPI. So that was just the question I raised. Just wanted to know if that's been done in other counties, if it's even legal, what are the ramifications of that? So
I can speak very generally to it, and this is such a legally interesting matter. I do my best not to say, oh no, you can't do that, right out of the bat on almost anything. There's some things it's really easy on. This is a general subject matter that has been looked at a number of times in different, as you can imagine, in different charter counties, and it's been addressed differently, and in at least some instances where some species of this, and it's usually directed to caps on growth of millage. All right, historically, that's how it's played out in a lot of charter counties. It's ended up being that charter provision that purports to regulate that has been found by the courts to be inconsistent with general law, which is out of bounds for a county charter, okay? There's one instance where there is, again, this directed to millage, not budget, okay? And so what I would tell you is if there's interest in this topic, I would need to really dig into the weeds further to see how much the analogous case law on a very related subject would actually apply to this issue. I don't think it's necessarily 100% dead on, but I need to look more. There is one county, charter county in Florida, Brevard County, that actually has a millage cap in its charter. And the way it was able to accomplish that, notwithstanding the fact that there were cases saying, no, you can't do that, is there was a special act passed by the legislature. And by the way, any special act passed by the legislature that purports to have general county-wide effect within a charter county has to be approved by the electors of that county. It's one of the special protections of a charter county that the legislature can't do a special act that applies just to the county and the county as a whole generally without it being approved at referendum. Well, there was a special act that was passed and then a referendum was held to see whether or not the Brevard County Charter would be allowed to be amended to add a charter millage cap, all right? That referendum passed, And then the Board of County Commissioners was able to put that charter millage cap on the ballot. It also passed, and now there's a cap. So that's the kind of convoluted way they had to go through to make that happen.
But I think we do have a cap. I mean, I think it's 10 mils, but I wouldn't swear to it. What's
So-
that? Say that again? 3% per year? I don't think we have a, I don't think there's I may be wrong, I don't think there's a cap on what we can do each year, but I think the ultimate cap, is that what you're talking about?
No, I apologize. What the cap this is Brevard County lingo. They just call it, the charter cap. That's all they call it. It's a cap on the increase in millage every year, and that's capped at 3% or CPI, whichever is greater. Under the Florida Constitution, counties for county purposes are limited to 10 mils.
Yeah, okay. That's what.
And I believe the 3% that was referenced is the increase for Save Our Homes.
Homestead, yes,
for
right.
residential.
Homestead property.
For homestead property, yes.
It's already 10% for commercial and
A lot of,
3%.
exactly.
Yeah.
So is this a topic that we want to learn more about, or because we're hearing that it may require a special act of the legislature, we want to leave it off the list? Anyone have any feelings about it? Yes, Vice Chair.
One thing I guess I worry about a little bit, we all know that people are moving here, and I just think about the amount of infrastructure and services that we need to provide for people, and this commission only meets every 8 years, so I worry that we really hamper ourselves to be flexible to the needs of the county when we put that kind of language into the charter, so that's my thought.
And I don't know, Mr. Vos, if you have, I'm certainly not trying to put you on the spot, but I heard Commissioner Jennings basically say it wasn't necessarily a millage percentage increase, it might be a budget percentage increase, and is there a difference, and do you need more time to think about that?
And that's the matter I was saying that I would want to take a little more time to think about whether or not that was legally distinguishable. If it were just a straight millage cap, I could tell you pretty easily, what the state of the law is. But on budget, I think I'd need to do a little more thinking.
Property appraiser?
I talked to the Brevard County property appraiser about this a little bit, because I saw that they were the one that had it. And so it is a 3% cap, but it's on the operating revenue, so it's generated from property taxes only. It's not the entire county budget. So it's on that portion, which constitutes about 30% of that particular county's entire budget.
So that, let's just say this year, for instance, then if it was capped at, that revenue was capped at 3%, if you had an 11% increase in values, then we'd have to lower the millage.
You'd have to roll back, right? There was an exception for new construction was carved out. It was pretty nebulous. And the one thing she told me was that they've had to bust the cap a bunch of times. And there is some language in there where they can do that for critical needs. So the sheriff has had to come back and put those critical need requests in, and they've had to go above the 3%.
I mean, there was some argument this year, invite completely, but there was some argument this year that there were some extenuating directions from the state that created a lot of.
Well, that's the other thing. You have the unfunded mandates,
Yeah,
and
so-
now we have a bill related to the COLA,
Yeah.
3% COLA for FRS. Well, that's a
Which is
$21 million hit.
That's for our county alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Minimum wage issues, things like that, all those can have ripple effects on your budgets.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Butler.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think it's something that we just can, if Mr. Vos can get some more information, we can talk about it some more. I think there's certainly worth something discussing.
Okay.
But it's all over the place. I think we need more information.
Sure, that sounds about right. Everybody good with that? We'll let Attorney Vos come back to us with a little more definition there, and maybe that's something we can group in with our parameters regarding public services and regulation and regulatory authority versus consolidation. That could be a good kind of general education meeting. Okay.
Okay. So before I jump into trying to get some sense of priorities on some of these areas so that Wade and I have some direction on how to best proceed and we can start to lay out future meetings with speakers and research and get things calendar appropriately, were there any other topics that we didn't cover? Just want to make sure we haven't missed anything or something that may have emerged in the midst of conversations from the first several meetings to where we are tonight that we might want to advance at this point. And this is not the only opportunity. Obviously, we're going to be meeting for a while and things are likely to emerge going forward, but I wanted, before we kind of moved into getting a sense of where we are with the plate that we have now, anything that has come up in any of your feedbacks or issues that we have not covered yet tonight, and as far as this list.
Yes, Commissioner. Microphone, sorry.
Back to that last issue, Wade, just the thought, and it probably isn't an example out there, but for this year, for instance, as I think through that and talking about having a limit on the budget increase, that would be revenues on these items, outside unfunded mandates. So to me, that becomes an X factor that we have no idea each year what additional things. So if you take that out of the equation, there might, I mean, then to have that kind of, I mean, I just would like to see if there's any of that out there that takes that unfunded mandate piece. I know, and again, and it's probably getting way too in the weeds, but
Yeah, and
but
this-
it is critical to the issue that we're talking about.
Sure, and this is probably going to gore a couple oxes, as you will, but I use the term unfunded mandates all the time, but it's not a precisely defined term of art. You know, what one person's unfunded mandate is a legislator's good policy goal. It's all, no offense, Senator, but okay, yeah. But what I'm saying is when the finance folks, when the budget office and the clerk's office and the property appraiser are sitting down and working numbers and so on, what number do they put in the slot that we call unfunded mandate? And if we try to come up with a definition for it, what's really in it and what's not. And so those would be that, as well as, let's say, for example, heaven forbid, we had another situation where a bunch of problems happened and we got billions of dollars again from the federal government. All that went onto your budget. All that went into your budget as revenue and then as an expenditure. One would think you might exclude that as well, if it's coming from somewhere else. So you get into all manner of different things of how you would manage it if you're controlling growth of budget. Maybe you zero it into particular budgets versus others. I don't know.
And that's the kind of, because it is, I mean, these issues that we're talking about are really relevant to the continuing conversation that we're talking about. If you're going to cap it, we can cap it things that are within our control here, so to speak. But you're right, we have a lot of outside influences that change the landscape of every budget year. Whether I agree or disagree, like some of the things that the state did this past year, totally agree with. Others not so much. But we have to adjust here locally. So,
and there may nevertheless be a straightforward way when thinking about it enough. If I take a look at it and think there's a path forward, in light of that other case law, there may still be something very clearly definable as a budget, of a certain description that could be subject to it. We just need to look a little bit further.
Any other topics or items that we haven't talked about on the list that you'd like to add to the list at this time? Seeing none, okay. We're going to try to get towards priorities and giving some direction to myself and Mr. Vos and Mr. Thomas on the short-term next few meetings, what you'd like to see them prepared to present.
I've got a suggestion that might work with your consent on this. So what I heard as we went through this, right now we have the 4 items that were under governance, which are going to take some meaty background work. The definition and clarification of the at-large county commissioners and reappointments, term limits, the county attorney, and the elected county administrator, county executive topic, and then I heard kind of a consensus to potentially move what was under possible new issues, number 3, the citizen charter initiatives, to moving that into governance.
Sure.
So what I'm suggesting, I don't know if we can do this informally, at least to give us kind of a straw poll of where to go. If I were to ask each of you to think of the top 3 items that you're interested in exploring, at least now, that what I could do then is just to say, all right, item number 1, how many of you, that's one of your top 3? And then you each get 3 votes. So I'm trying to say they're not Cook County, you don't get 4 or 5 votes. We're going to trust you that you're going to count this appropriately. But just to give us a straw poll vote of where kind of the sentiment is, and we'll go through the items of governance issues and then the possible new items as well. I think the cleanup items, we can just kind of pick and choose as we can able to work our way through that.
So you want us to have 3 votes for all of the topics on the 2 pages, or 3 votes?
I want to take the governance issues first. So
Okay.
right now, there would be a total of 5 items. So I'm trying to get a sense of where the consensus is of the top 3 within governance, so that we can start to get an idea of where the kind of the sentiment and interest are there.
Okay.
Make
Does
sense?
everyone understand what we're doing?
Was there any cleanup issues that we were also thinking about moving?
The one I had, on cleanup, let's see.
We removed environmental lands as an answered question. That was the only note I have.
Right,
on
that one was
topic.
taken out, right. Under section 202.
I don't remember if 5.02, was that?
I think we were going to have
That
Mr.
was
Vos
gonna-
come back.
that was
to
gonna
this.
Still
just
in
take some
cleanup
additional
research.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Yeah. I only had under cleanup, taking out number 3. That was my notes.
So Commissioner Jennings, what was the item that you were talking about? Is that the one he mentioned?
That was the charter initiative, the citizen charter initiative. It would be under possible new items, citizen initiative petitions and referendum, moving them to, whenever there's a charter initiative, to move it to the general election as opposed to a special election. I believe that's what you were getting at, Commissioner, right?
We move that to governance?
Moving that to governance, right.
So that would be one that we have.
Yeah, so what I would say is you've got now, you've got 5 items in governance. I'm just trying to get a straw poll sense of where the commission is at on your top 3 items, okay? And it doesn't mean we're not going to review the other ones. I'm just trying to get a sense of where we put our energies and efforts first and foremost.
All right, so if I'm doing this correctly, you have 3 votes and you have 5 choices or 6 choices?
There's 1, 2, no, there's 5. There's 5.
Okay, so we did not move the county referendums into governance. We've
I'm only
moved.
showing 4 under governance, and the 5th one becomes the charter initiative.
Okay, all right. So if one of your top priorities is number 1, the county commissioners at large districts appointing representatives, please raise your hand. Is that 1?
1?
Commissioner Tipsy Scott, did you vote?
Is that a 1?
Thank
Okay,
you.
gotcha.
All right, 3.01, Board of County Commissioners term limits. If that's one of your priorities, raise your hand. Okay. Pretty much everyone
12.
except for Mr. Steck. Okay. County Attorney, appointment, removal of County Attorney. If that's one of your 3, please raise your hand. 4, 5, 6.
6.
Okay. Elected County Administrator, if that's one of your top 3, raise your hand, please. 7, 8?
7.
8, I think I counted 8.
One more time. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm sorry. Okay, gotcha. Yep.
All right, and then the Charter Initiative, Citizen Initiative petitions and referenda, that's one of your top 3.
Moving to the general election. Yeah, for any of those to be considered in the general.
I think we also are talking about potentially lowering the thresholds for, I'm talking about what is under possible.
There was a
issues
discussion
number 3.
about also just changing the threshold that was adjusted last time.
I think that's the main focus of this topic.
And threshold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay.
But it was also, I think, not allowing charter changes to be held under some special.
That was,
Special.
I think that was a
that's
separate-
item 5, that's item 5 under questions to be addressed. And so that was one of the things that I was trying to clarify before we voted, if we're grouping those together. Might as well group those together, right? That makes the most
Yeah,
sense.
I would say if group that in that we just.
Well, they're related, but there are two distinct focuses there, I think. One is moving it to any charter issues going to a general election, and then the second piece of that was the tax, some sort of tax limitation in whatever form that may take, tax or budget limitations.
No. No.
Maybe I
So-
misunderstood
okay,
what you said, Chair. I'm sorry.
Just to make sure we're on the same page, we have possible new issues, number 3, 6.02 charter initiatives, citizen initiative petitions and referenda. And this topic, what we're talking about, is looking at the threshold for citizen initiatives to make it on the ballot, both the percentage of electors that are required to sign a petition and the amount of time it takes, or they're allowed, to collect petitions. We move that into the 5th topic of governance issues, and I believe that the vote we just took was on that topic. We also have item 5 under questions to be addressed, which was county referendums that Commissioner Jennings raised, which was, should all charter amendments be required to be on a general election ballot, similar to the taxation referenda that has been required by the state. And as Mr. Thomas said, those are 2 separate issues. Do we want to consolidate those issues, or do we want to consider them separately?
I think it's separate.
Separately? Okay.
All right. All right, so the vote that we had for the last item that got 9 votes was simply on changing thresholds associated with citizen initiative petitions.
I've already run out of my votes.
Right, you got your-
I didn't know we had another one.
I want to do the same thing with the questions to be addressed, if I can. Just as I said, this is just a straw poll to give Wade and I some feedback of where you're at. Okay?
Okay, so now we're moving on to the possible new issues or questions to be addressed. Are we putting those all together, or how do you want to do that, Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Chair, I'm suggesting that we just leave the cleanup issues, let Wade and I kind of juggle that in our own agendas as we work through, because those are kind of, we can juggle that relative to the other items, if that's okay. But I would like to potentially do a similar ranking with regards to the questions to be addressed.
We also have the human rights issue, which is the only remaining issue under possible new issues. Do you want direction on that
Well,
topic?
I tell you what, if we want to, let's go ahead and take the 3 votes on each of those as well, if that makes sense, on that section.
No. There's only one topic left in possible new issues. We eliminated any engaging issues, emerging issues.
Sorry, I thought you were in the cleanups, yeah.
We moved item 3 to governance issues. So my point is that if you want us to vote on questions to be addressed, you have an outstanding issue under possible new issues, human rights, that we're either not going to vote on, or we need to include it into one of the categories that we voted on.
Okay. Why don't
Does
we?
that make sense to everybody?
Yep. Why don't we move human rights to the questions then? I think that's what you're advancing, right?
That's fine with me, if it's fine with everybody else.
All right. All right, so let's go through the same items. Let's at least get your top 3 votes there. The first one is,
3 votes of what? I'm sorry, I'm.
we're going to be now addressing, if I understand, Mr. Chair, we're going to take the questions to be addressed, but we are adding the human rights issue under the questions to be addressed. I believe that's what you were suggesting, correct?
Yeah, so Commissioner Eggers, this has been a process that Mr. Thomas suggested would be beneficial for him to get feedback. So we're using the process that he suggested.
So I gave you 3 votes on the first topic. I'm going to give you another 3 on this one, just so I can get a pulse of the group. So you get a fresh 3 votes.
I just thought there was the top 3 topics.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was going to take.
All of the possible ones that we want to look at, and we only had 5 of those to look at. So now we're adding 1 or 2 more, right? Is that?
We
You
have.
get 3 more votes.
Oh, 3 more votes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just gives me a sense of where the pulse is, where you're at. So we're starting fresh under this section under questions to be addressed. The first item is 4.01, County Administrator. What does unclassified mean? What is the list of unclassified? Oh, I'm sorry. First item, number 4. 4.01, County Administrator. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. County referendums.
The general election.
General election. Okay. Consolidation of the public services question. limiting annual increases, yes. Yes, considering limiting annual increases in the county budget to CPI or some threshold, some cap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. And then the last item on this one is the item under, let me get the wording right here for you. Section 202, human rights, adding sexual orientation and gender and appearance. Thank you. I have it in my notes, but I don't have it in my note right in front of me. Identity as a protection item. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that 4? Okay, gotcha. Okay, super.
So for clarification, it already is, so we're talking about just adding it to the
In the
charter
charter.
possibly.
That's what I
as
certainly
additional support, because it already is what we're asking for.
That's certainly what I have heard.
Okay, that's
I'll
right. All right,
defer
I'll
to
make sure.
the Vice Chair on that one if it were missed that. Okay. I know that doesn't seem clean, but it does give me at least some sense so that Wade and I can get some sense of priority of where the temperature of the board is. So.
Okay. I took notes as well, so I think we've got good direction from you all. I appreciate you helping us set some priorities, and like I said, this is not exclusive to bringing up new issues or reprioritizing issues if you all feel the need to do that. So, okay, we're moving on to other business. Is there any other business? Seeing none. Confirming the next meeting dates. Thank you all for facilitating this meeting. I know we had to change the date. I appreciate the flexibility. We do have another meeting set for Wednesday, November 15th, which is 2 weeks from tonight. Is everyone still okay for that meeting? No? Senator? Okay. Everybody else, are you okay? Or no? How many people cannot make the November 15th meeting? Cannot. 1, 2, 3, 4. You'd be a remote. Okay. Do we want to keep that? You cannot make it? All right. So should we consolidate the November 15th and December 20th meeting into a new meeting date? Because I don't think a December 20th meeting is probably a very good date either. Should we try to do that now, or should we ask Mr. Thomas to call everybody and maybe do it via email?
That's probably easier to do it.
So we're going to try to have one more meeting this calendar year, and it will not be on November 15th or December 20th. Is that okay?
Not Thanksgiving week either, please.
Duly noted.
All right, so Mr. Thomas will be in touch. Anything else that anyone wants to add, or questions, concerns, comments?
Just on that point, is a Wednesday night, if we're going to be looking around a different date, is Wednesday still the night you would prefer to meet? Does that work out best, or do I have options if based on where the boards may be?
I don't want to limit you, so let's say you have some options.
We got some options. Doesn't have to be on a Wednesday per se. All right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you.